never thought a hike could turn into a nightmare. I mean, I'm no outdoorsman, but I've walked trails before. Nothing crazy, just a couple hours here and there to clear my head. Last weekend, though, I decided to push myself a little. The woods near my house aren't some sprawling wilderness. They're just a big patch of trees off the highway, maybe a few miles deep. People go there all the time. Families, dog walkers, even joggers. I figured I'd take a longer loop, maybe 4 or 5 miles, and be back before dark. I packed a water bottle, my phone, and a granola bar, threw on my old sneakers, and headed out. That was my first mistake, thinking I didn't need more than that. It started fine. The trail was marked with little red tags nailed to the trees, and the air smelled like pine and damp earth. The sun was high, filtering through the branches, and I could hear birds chirping. I felt good, like I was finally doing something instead of sitting on my couch scrolling through my phone. I followed the tags for maybe an hour, snapping a few pics of the scenery. Mossy rocks, a little stream, that sort of thing. My phone said it was 2:30 p.m., and I figured I had plenty of time before sunset. I didn't even check the battery. Second mistake. The trouble started when I saw this deer. It was just standing there, maybe 50 feet off the trail, staring at me. Not moving, not eating, just watching. Its eyes were huge and black, and something about it creeped me out. I shook it off, though. Deer are normal in the woods, right? But then I noticed the trail markers were gone. I'd been distracted by the deer and must have veered off the path. No big deal, I thought. I'll just backtrack. Except when I turned around, the red tags weren't there either. The trees all looked the same, tall, skinny pines with needles carpeting the ground. No landmarks, no stream, just a sea of green and brown stretching out forever. I pulled out my phone to check the map, but the signal was gone. Not even one bar. The battery was at 40%, which wasn't great, but I figured I could use the compass app. I picked a direction, west, I think, and started walking, telling myself I'd hit the highway eventually. The woods couldn't be that big. But the sun was dipping lower, casting long shadows that made the trees look like they were leaning toward me. The birds had stopped chirping, and the only sound was my shoes crunching on the needles. I kept going, trying to stay calm, but my chest was getting tight, like something was squeezing it. After maybe an hour, I realized I was lost, really lost. The trees weren't thinning out, and the air was getting colder. My water was half gone, and the granola bar was starting to feel like a dumb choice for a survival kit. I stopped to catch my breath, leaning against a tree, and that's when I heard it. A low, rumbling sound, like a growl but deeper, almost vibrating through the ground. I froze. My first thought was a bear, but bears don't sound like that, do they? This was wrong. It came again, louder, from somewhere behind me. I didn't wait to find out what it was. I bolted. I ran until my lungs burned, branches snapping against my arms and face. I didn't care where I was going, just that I had to get away from that sound. When I finally stopped, gasping for air, I realized I'd dropped my water bottle somewhere. My phone was still in my pocket, but the screen showed 15% battery now. The compass was useless. It kept spinning like it couldn't find north. The sun was almost gone, just a faint orange glow on the horizon, and the woods were turning dark fast. That's when I saw the cabin. It was small, maybe 10 feet wide, made of weathered logs with a sagging roof. The windows were black, no lights inside, and the door hung slightly open. It looked abandoned, but it was something. Shelter, maybe a phone, maybe a map. I didn't think too hard about it. I just wanted out of the open. I called out, "Hello? Anyone there?" My voice echoed a little, but no one answered. The growling had stopped at least, so I stepped inside. The air in the cabin was damp and smelled like rot. There was a wooden table in the middle, covered in dust, and a rusted lantern hanging from a hook on the wall. No phone, no map, just junk. Broken bottles, a cracked mirror, some old newspapers too faded to read. I shut the door behind me and wedged the table against it, figuring it'd hold if whatever was out there came sniffing around. My phone was down to 8%, so I turned it off to save what was left. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, trying to think. Maybe I'd wait till morning when I could see better. Maybe I'd hear cars from the highway. Maybe I'd be okay. That's when the scratching started. It was faint at first, like fingernails dragging across the wood outside. I held my breath, listening. It moved along the wall, slow and deliberate, circling the cabin. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it had burst. Then it stopped, right by the door. I stared at the table, praying it'd hold. A second later, something slammed into the door, hard enough to shake the whole cabin. The table slid an inch, and I jumped up, grabbing the lantern off the wall like it was a weapon. Another slam, louder, and the door cracked down the middle. I screamed, "Get away!" But my voice sounded small, pathetic. The third hit splintered the door, and I saw it, just for a second. A hand, or what looked like a hand, reached through the gap. It was long and thin, with fingers that bent too far back, tipped with jagged black nails. The skin was grayish, slick, like it was wet. I swung the lantern as hard as I could, smashing it against the hand. There was a wet crunch, and the thing pulled back, letting out a scream that wasn't human, high and rattling, like a dying animal. I shoved the table back against the door, piling anything I could find on top, bottles, the mirror, even the newspapers. The scratching started again, faster now, all around the cabin, like there was more than one of them. I don't know how long I sat there, curled up in the corner, listening to them claw at the walls. My phone was dead now, and the only light was a sliver of moonlight coming through a crack in the roof. The sounds didn't stop. They'd scratch, then go quiet, then slam into the walls again. I kept thinking about that hand, those fingers, and what they'd do if they got in. My mind was racing, picturing teeth, eyes, things I couldn't even name. I wanted to run, but where? Out there was worse. At some point, I must have passed out from exhaustion because I woke up to silence. The cabin was still dark, but the scratching was gone. I didn't move for a long time, just listened, waiting for it to start again. When it didn't, I crept to the door and peeked through the splintered gap. The woods were quiet, bathed in gray pre-dawn light. No growling, no hands, nothing. I shoved the table aside and stepped outside, my legs shaking so bad I could barely stand. The air was cold, and my breath fogged in front of me. I started walking, picking a direction and praying it was right. The trees looked different now, twisted like they'd grown wrong overnight. Some had claw marks gouged into the bark, deep and fresh. I kept moving, ignoring the ache in my legs and the cuts on my arms from running. After what felt like hours, I heard it, the faint hum of cars, the highway. I almost cried, stumbling toward the sound, until I broke through the tree line and saw asphalt. A trucker picked me up a few minutes later. I must have looked like hell, dirty, scratched up, babbling about the cabin and the things in the woods. He didn't say much, just handed me a bottle of water and drove me to a gas station. I called a friend to come get me, and when he showed up, I tried to explain what happened. He didn't believe me, said I'd probably just freaked myself out getting lost. Maybe he's right. Maybe it was all in my head. But I can't sleep now. Every night I hear that scratching, faint, like it's coming from the walls of my apartment. I've checked the doors, the windows, everything. Nothing's there. Yesterday I found a long, thin scratch on my front door, right at eye level. It wasn't there before. I keep thinking about that hand, those fingers bending backward. and I wonder if they followed me home. I don't know what they want, but I'm scared they're waiting for me to step outside again. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and please subscribe. Your support will help us tremendously. Thank you.